Welcome to the Funeral Channel Network podcast. I am so glad you're here joining us for this deep dive today because, well, we're getting into something really fascinating.
Mm.
But before we get into the source material, I want you to just take a second and think about your smartphone.
Oh, yeah, the smartphone. Always a dangerous place to start.
Right. Specifically, I want you to think about that digital camera roll sitting in your pocket right now. If you are anything like me, you probably have, 10,000, maybe 20,000 photos on there?
Easily.
Yeah.
I think I'm pushing 30,000, honestly.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe more. It's this massive, infinite scroll of, sunsets, half-eaten meals, screenshots of memes you meant to send to a friend but totally forgot, and endless, slightly different angles of your dog sleeping.
Oh, absolutely. The dog photos take up half the storage.
And let's be totally honest with each other here. How often do you actually sit down and look at them? Really look at them. You might flick your thumb past a few hundred when you are desperately searching for that one specific picture of a receipt from 3 years ago.
Right, the frantic scrolling.
Yeah, but for the most part, they're just sitting there in the dark. They are this invisible ocean of data. Now, I want you to completely contrast that feeling, that vast, overwhelming, kind of weightless digital hoarding with a very specific physical experience.
Okay, I'm with you.
Imagine opening an old desk drawer, maybe one you haven't cleaned out in a decade. You push aside some dead batteries and some old pens, and right there at the bottom, you find a single worn, slightly bent physical photograph.
Oh, wow.
Or maybe it's a handwritten note from a friend tucked inside the dust jacket of a paperback book.
Yeah.
Think about what happens in your body in that exact moment. Everything just stops.
It really does. It's a completely different feeling.
There is a completely different gravitational weight to that experience, isn't there? It demands your attention. It
Yeah.
physically pulls you out of the present moment and forces you to reckon with the past. And that profound difference, the sheer undeniable weight of the physical object in a basically weightless digital world, is exactly what we are exploring today.
It is a striking contrast, and honestly, it's the perfect foundation for what we're digging into today. Because, traditionally in our culture, we tend to view certain physical objects through a very narrow, purely utilitarian lens.
Yeah, just looking at what they do for us in the moment.
Right. And today, we are looking specifically at the materials and philosophy behind the funeral program site, and it really challenges a major blind spot we have. We normally think of a funeral program as just, well, an itinerary for a profoundly sad event.
Just a piece of paper handed to you at the door.
Exactly. We treat it like a piece of paper that simply dictates the logistics. It tells you when the eulogy is happening, what hymn the congregation is going to sing next, and who the pallbearers are. You use it for an hour, and then it's over.
Into the recycling bin.
But the concepts we are analyzing today flip that utilitarian assumption completely on its head. The ideas presented in our source material reveal a completely different reality. These programs are not disposable flyers. They are deliberately engineered psychological keepsakes. They're meticulously crafted physical containers for human memory. And once you understand that massive shift in perspective, it completely changes how you think about memory preservation entirely.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because this whole idea of the digital versus the physical is something we all grapple with every single day, usually without even realizing it. The material explicitly draws a line in the sand regarding today's world.
It really does. It's very direct about it.
It points out that we currently live in an era where memories are stored digitally, and crucially, it uses the word fleetingly. It contrasts that fleeting digital existence with the tangible and enduring nature of a physical printed program.
That word choice is so important.
Right, but I want to really chew on that word fleetingly, because on the surface, fleeting means short-lived, but my digital photos aren't short-lived. They're backed up on 3 different servers.
Yeah, they technically exist forever.
Exactly. So what does it actually mean for a digital memory to be fleeting?
It's a brilliant distinction to make, honestly, because the concept of fleetingly here isn't about data corruption or files getting deleted. It's about the psychology of access.
Psychology of access, okay.
What's fascinating about this material is how it highlights that digital storage creates a sort of psychological illusion. It provides a false sense of security.
Oh, I completely do that.
We all do. We take 1,000 photos of a family vacation, we watch the little progress bar as they upload to the cloud, and our brain just checks a box. We think, great, the job is done, those memories are safe, they're preserved forever.
Right, they're safe in the cloud.
But what the philosophy here is challenging is the assumption that storing a memory is the same thing as keeping a memory alive. Because those files lack any physical presence in our daily, tangible environment, those digital memories are effectively asleep.
They're in a coma.
Precisely. They are in a digital coma. Without a physical trigger, something you can actually see sitting on a mantelpiece as you walk through your living room, or something you can feel the texture of in your hands when you open a drawer, the memory remains unaccessed.
Because we need that reminder.
Right. The human brain is incredibly efficient, sometimes to a fault. It relies on environmental cues to trigger recall. If there is no cue, the recall just doesn't happen.
So it's just sitting there doing nothing.
Exactly. So the memory exists as raw data on a server farm somewhere in Nevada, but it isn't actively functioning as a memory in your life. It is entirely out of sight and therefore entirely out of mind. It is fleeting because your conscious engagement with it is virtually zero.
Okay, I hear that, and it definitely resonates. But I have to wrestle with this idea of the physical being enduring, because when I first absorbed this, a part of my brain immediately threw up a red flag.
Oh, what kind of red flag?
I thought, wait a minute, isn't a piece of paper actually infinitely more fragile than a backed up digital file? I mean, let's look at the physical reality of paper. It can tear. True.
You accidentally set your coffee mug down on it, and it's ruined forever. It fades if you leave it in a sunny room. A dog can eat it. A digital file in the cloud, assuming the servers don't all simultaneously melt down, technically lasts forever in a pristine state.
It's mathematically perfect.
Exactly. It feels like we are comparing an old, scratchy vinyl record that can snap in half to a flawless, lossless Spotify playlist. The Spotify playlist isn't going to degrade. It isn't going to warp if you leave it in a hot car during a summer move.
Right. The digital file is resilient in that way.
So how on earth are we justifying the claim that the fragile, physical piece of paper is the thing that is more enduring?
That tension you're feeling is exactly where the deepest insight of this material lives. And I love that you brought up the vinyl record versus Spotify analogy, because it perfectly illustrates the underlying mechanics of what makes something truly endure in the human experience.
Okay, how so? When the concepts here describe a physical printed program as enduring, we have to detach that word from the idea of physical indestructibility. It is absolutely not claiming that paper is bulletproof or immune to the elements. What it is actually talking about is the permanence of attention.
The permanence of attention. So you're saying it's not about whether the paper can survive a fire, it's about whether my brain can manage to ignore it when it's just sitting there on my desk.
Exactly. Let's break down your music analogy to see how the mechanics of this work. Think about how you interact with the Spotify playlist. You can pull it up on your phone, hit shuffle, put your phone in your pocket, and then proceed to entirely ignore the music while you clean your entire house or answer emails.
Yeah, it just becomes background noise.
The music becomes a frictionless wallpaper to your life. It requires absolutely zero ongoing cognitive investment from you. But a vinyl record? The mechanics of playing a vinyl record demand to be engaged with.
You can't just ignore it.
No, you have to physically walk over to the shelf. You have to read the spines. You pull it out, and you have to handle it carefully to avoid the grooves. You take it out of the paper sleeve, you place it on the turntable, and you have to precisely, intentionally drop the needle. And then, 20 minutes later, it forces you to stop what you are doing, walk back over, and physically flip it to the B-side. It requires your active, physical participation.
It's a ritual. It forces you to be present with the thing you are consuming.
It is a profound ritual. And the philosophy we are unpacking argues that a thoughtfully designed physical funeral program functions through the exact same psychological mechanism.
Because it's an object.
Yes, the digital file of a photograph might technically outlast the paper it's printed on in a 1,000-year timeline. But in the timeline of your actual lived human life, the paper demands to be held. It takes up literal three-dimensional physical space in the real world.
You literally have to navigate around it.
Right. It catches your eye when you walk past the bookshelves and see it tucked away. Every time your eyes sweep across it, even peripherally, your brain has to process what it is. That unavoidable physical interaction is what makes the memory endure in your conscious mind, not just on a server farm.
Oh, wow. I never thought about friction like that.
The tangible, fragile nature of the object is exactly what forces a moment of reflection. A frictionless digital file simply cannot replicate that friction of reality.
That makes an incredible amount of sense. It completely redefines the word enduring. It's about how the object forces us to interact with our own history, not just how securely the data is locked away.
Exactly.
Think about your own physical space right now listening to this. Look around the room you're in or think about your home. What items do you genuinely consider to be your most truly enduring keepsakes? The things you would grab if you had 5 minutes to pack a box.
The really irreplaceable stuff.
Yeah. Is it a piece of jewelry your grandmother wore? Is it a ticket stub from a concert that changed your life? A physical handwritten letter from someone you love? And out of all those truly cherished, deeply enduring items, are any of them digital?
Probably not.
I'm willing to bet they are almost entirely physical objects. We are physical beings, and we fundamentally crave that tactile, undeniable connection to our past.
We do. We are wired for haptic feedback. The way things feel in our hands informs our brain about their value.
Right. And that naturally begs a massive question. If physical objects hold this power, what exactly makes one specific piece of paper worth holding onto for decades, while we throw away hundreds of other pieces of paper like receipts, junk mail, flyers, every single week?
That's the million-dollar question for designers.
Which leads us into what I think is the most incredibly ambitious, almost staggering idea presented in this material: the concept of capturing a person's entire essence in print.
It is a staggering claim. The material makes a very bold declarative statement here. It posits that a properly constructed funeral program goes far beyond being a printed document.
Okay.
Its actual function is to preserve memories, emotions, and the essence of a loved one's life. And it explicitly states that the goal is to achieve both visual beauty and deep emotional significance.
Capturing the essence of a human life on a folded piece of paper. I mean, just pause and really think about the sheer magnitude of that task. Trying to capture a whole human life, we are talking about decades of lived experiences.
It's immense.
The weird little quirks, the complex relationships, the inside jokes, the profound grief, the specific way they laugh, their quietest fears, their loudest triumphs, all of it. Trying to distill that onto a few pages.
It sounds impossible.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because it initially reminded me of trying to describe a complex movie in a single sentence. But honestly, even that analogy falls short.
How so?
It's more like trying to describe the plot, the cinematography, the emotional impact of the score, and the hidden philosophical themes of a 3-hour sprawling masterpiece of a film using only a single still photograph. It requires an intense, almost scientifically impossible level of distillation. How does a physical piece of paper actually go about doing that without failing miserably?
It is the ultimate design challenge. It's not just graphic design. It is emotional architecture. And if we look closely at the underlying philosophy of the material provided by the funeral program site, the key mechanism lies in that specific phrase: visual beauty.
Visual beauty.
When we hear visual beauty, we have a tendency in our modern fast-paced culture to dismiss it as mere aesthetics. We think it just means making something look pretty or putting a nice border around a photo purely for the sake of decoration.
Like making it look fancy just to be fancy.
Right. But in cognitive terms, visual beauty is doing incredibly heavy lifting. It acts as a critical subconscious signifier.
A signifier. Break that down for me. How does beauty signify something to the brain?
Think about how you process mail. When you go to your mailbox, you pull out a stack of paper. Within fractions of a second, without even reading the words, your brain is sorting that paper based on visual and haptic signifier.
Oh, totally. I sort over the trash can.
We all do. Thin, glossy paper with loud, chaotic fonts. Your brain instantly categorizes it as junk mail. It goes straight in the recycling bin. But if you pull out an envelope made of heavy, textured cardstock with elegant typography and clean, intentional spacing.
Oh, yeah? You pause?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Before you even know who it's from, your brain has fired off a signal that says, stop. Pay attention. This is valuable. This is a wedding invitation or a birth announcement or a serious letter.
Right. It commands reverence before I even read a single word.
Exactly. When a funeral program is beautifully designed with high-quality layouts, intentional white space, and thoughtful aesthetics, it subliminally signals to the human brain, this is a keepsake. This is a sacred document. Do not throw this away on your way out the door.
It's a man's to be kept.
Yes. And regarding this incredibly difficult idea of capturing an essence, we have to look at the mechanics of how design achieves translation. The specific fonts you choose, the way the photographs are framed and cropped, the color palette, even the implied texture of the background element.
All the little details.
All of these subtle visual cues work together in concert to subliminally communicate personality.
So the design choices are essentially acting as a nonverbal tone of voice.
Precisely. Imagine a program designed for a young, vibrant, wildly creative artist. You wouldn't use stiff, formal lettering. The layout might use dynamic, asymmetrical framing, bold and unexpected accent colors, and typography that feels kinetic and alive.
Like a messy handwriting font or something.
Yeah, something with energy. The visual language matches the energy of the life lived. Conversely, imagine a program for a quiet, deeply reflective, traditional grandfather. The design would likely utilize elegant, classic serif typography, perfectly balanced in symmetrical layouts, and softer, muted grounding tones.
Very structured and calm.
Right. The visual architecture itself is doing the incredibly complex work of translating an invisible human personality into a physical visual form. That is the mechanical process of how you capture an essence.
I want to ask you to do a quick, slightly intense thought experiment with us right now. Just take 10 seconds and think about your own life. If someone had to capture your unique essence on a single printed page tomorrow, what elements would they actually need to use?
That's a heavy question.
It really is. What colors genuinely represent your energy? What font captures the way you speak? Are you a structured, classic serif font or a relaxed, flowing script? What one specific photo captures the real you? Not just a photo where your hair looks good, but a photo that captures who you actually are when you are deeply engaged with the world.
It's hard to pick just one.
When you try to answer those questions for yourself, it highlights just how excruciatingly difficult but absolutely crucial this process of curation is for a family. You are trying to boil an ocean down to its most potent, concentrated drop.
And realizing the sheer weight of that intense curation process is exactly why we had to examine the psychological state of the people doing the curating. Because asking a grieving family to engage in that level of high-stakes, deeply emotional distillation and asking them to do it starting from a totally blank page is a recipe for complete psychological paralysis.
Which leads us directly into the massive importance of templates. The materials heavily emphasize over and over again that the funeral program site provides thoughtfully designed templates.
You do, very strongly.
They offer structure and consistency. And the core claim is that these specific templates help families capture these massive, life-defining moments without feeling overwhelmed. But let's really unpack the why here. Why is a blank page so dangerous in this specific scenario?
To understand the danger of the blank page, we have to look closely at the neurobiology and the psychology of active grief. When a family is in the immediate days following a death and they're tasked with planning a service, their brains are essentially undergoing an extreme trauma response.
Their systems are just flooded.
Exactly. Their cognitive load, the amount of working memory and processing power their brain has available, is completely maxed out, just trying to survive the emotional shock. The prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain responsible for executive function, logic, and complex decision-making, is heavily impaired by the flood of stress hormones.
So their brain is basically redlining, just trying to get out of bed in the morning.
Exactly. Every tiny, seemingly insignificant decision feels like climbing a mountain. What time should the cars arrive? What kind of flowers? Who needs to be called?
Just a barrage of questions.
So if you hand a person whose brain is in that compromised state a totally blank piece of paper or a blank word processing document and say, okay, design a visually beautiful document that perfectly captures the complete nuanced essence of the person you just lost, it is cognitively paralyzing.
It's just too much.
It is entirely too much freedom. Decision fatigue sets in within seconds. They are suddenly forced to make 100 micro-decisions about margins, font pairings, text alignment, and image resolution before they can even begin to process the emotional meaning of the document.
Okay, I have an analogy for this that I think really visualizes what you're saying about cognitive load and freedom. Think about taking a young kid bowling for the very first time.
Oh, I like where this is going.
Right. If you just hand an 8-year-old a heavy 12-pound bowling ball, point them at the shiny, oiled wooden lane and let them throw it, it's going right into the gutter. Every single time.
Straight into the gutter.
The lane is too wide, the ball is too heavy, and they just don't have the mechanics to keep it straight. It's a wildly frustrating experience. They feel overwhelmed, and they aren't going to hit a single pin.
It's a setup for failure.
But what happens when you put those inflatable bumpers up on the sides of the lane? Suddenly, the parameters are fixed. The kid can throw the ball and it can bounce wildly to the left, hit the bumper, weave back to the right, hit the other bumper. But because the structure is holding it in, it is guaranteed to make it to the end of the lane and hit the target.
Yes, the ball reaches the pins no matter what.
The templates that this material is talking about are exactly like the bumpers on the bowling lane of grief. When you are emotionally exhausted, when your executive function is compromised and your aim is completely off, the rigid structure of the template keeps all the vital, beautiful, emotional information from going into the cognitive gutter.
That is a phenomenal way to conceptualize the mechanics of it. The template acts as a shock absorber for the cognitive burden. Because a template has already made the complex decisions about visual hierarchy, margin width, and font compatibility, the grieving family doesn't have to waste their precious limited mental energy on graphic design.
They don't have to invent the wheel.
No, they can pour 100% of their available focus entirely into the emotional content, choosing the right photo, writing the right words. The structure protects them from their own overwhelm. But it's vital to recognize that the benefits of this structure and consistency don't end with the creators.
Oh.
They are equally, if not more, important for the end users, the people sitting in the pews reading the program.
Wait, really? How does the template help the reader? Aren't they just looking at the finished product?
They are, but we have to remember the context. When mourners attend a funeral service, they're also operating in a highly vulnerable emotional state. Their own cognitive processing is dialed back.
Oh, I see. Everyone in the room is struggling.
Exactly. A consistent, predictable, beautifully engineered structure in the program allows their brains to easily navigate and process the information being presented to them without friction.
I see. If the design is completely chaotic.
Yes, if the design is chaotic, if there are 6 different fonts fighting for attention, if the photos are overlapping the text, if the layout is unpredictable and confusing, it creates visual noise.
It's just hard to look at.
And that visual noise deeply distracts from the emotional resonance of the moment. The reader's brain has to work entirely too hard just to decode the literal words on the page, which gets in the way of them actually feeling the emotion behind the words.
They're squinting, trying to read a yellow font on a white background instead of actually taking in the message.
Exactly. By providing a clean, professionally consistent structure, the template completely removes those cognitive barriers. It paves a perfectly smooth, frictionless pathway for the emotional content to be absorbed seamlessly by the reader.
So if I'm tracking this correctly, there's this brilliant, almost counterintuitive paradox hiding right at the center of this material. By imposing very strict structural boundaries, by forcing a family to use a predefined template with locked-in layouts, you are actually enabling the absolute highest possible level of personalization and emotional expression.
It really is incredible.
It's the restriction that creates the freedom.
It is a beautiful paradox, and it's a foundational rule of art and design. Think of a poet writing a sonnet. The strict rules of the sonnet, the 14 lines, the specific rhyme scheme, the iambic pentameter, don't trap the poet. They force the poet to elevate their language to fit the structure.
It forces creativity.
Exactly. The structure holds the physical space so the emotional essence can breathe and resonate.
That is profound. Okay, so we have the structure, we have the bumpers on the lane. Let's look closely at what actually gets poured inside that structure to make it work. The materials explicitly deconstruct what it takes to build a meaningful narrative, and it identifies 3 very specific, non-negotiable pillars that must come together: photos, life stories, and personal messages.
It's very telling from a psychological perspective that the philosophy breaks it down into those 3 specific components.
Yeah.
It's not arbitrary.
Yep.
No, each one of those elements serves a fundamentally different psychological and neurological function for the reader, and they have to work in perfect harmony to achieve that essence we talked about earlier.
Let's break down the mechanics of each one. First, the photos. This is obviously the visual anchor, but it's more than just knowing what the person looked like. It's the immediate, visceral connection. Human beings are biologically hardwired for facial recognition.
Yes, it's automatic.
Before you even consciously read a single letter of the text, your brain sees the face, recognizes the eyes, the smile, and it instantly grounds the document in a physical reality. It triggers an instant rush of recognition, memory, and emotion.
It bypasses the logical brain entirely.
Exactly. Then, moving to the second pillar, you have the life stories. This provides the architectural framework of the person's existence. It's the chronology, the major milestones, the historical facts of their journey. It tells the reader where they started, where they traveled, what they built, and what they did.
Exactly. You have the immediate biological trigger, followed by the historical context. And then, crucially, you arrive at the third pillar, the personal messages. This is where the true vibrating emotional resonance of the document lives. This is the documentation of the impact the person actually had on the world around them.
But let me push back and really challenge this requirement for a second.
Sure, for it.
Because when I look at those three pillars, I wonder why all three are absolutely necessary for a document to be considered a keepsake. I mean, let's say a family just uses a stunning, high-quality photograph on the cover, and inside they write a really comprehensive, beautifully articulated life story, a fantastic, factual biography.
Okay.
Wouldn't that be enough to honor someone's life? Why does the underlying philosophy here insist so strongly on the inclusion of personal messages, quotes, or sentiments from others to create this meaningful narrative?
It's a fantastic question, and it really forces us to examine the fundamental difference between information and meaning. If we connect this to the bigger picture and look at how humans construct legacy, a document that only contains a photograph and a chronological list of facts and milestones is, at its core, just a biography.
Right, it's just the facts.
It's essentially an encyclopedia entry. It's highly informative, it might be perfectly accurate, but it is fundamentally structurally detached from the human experience of love.
It's sterile. It's a Wikipedia page.
Exactly. It's sterile. The personal messages, the specific memories from a daughter, the inside joke from a lifelong best friend, the quote about how the person made their coworkers feel, these are the elements that anchor the entire narrative in the reality of community and shared human grief.
It gives it a heartbeat.
It does. The life story, the biography, tells you what the person did with their time on Earth. But the personal messages tell you who the person actually was to the people who survived them. It provides tangible evidence of love. It documents the ripple effect of their existence.
Oh, the ripple effect. I love that.
When a template intentionally carves out space for those messy, beautiful personal reflections, it completely transforms the document. It stops being a sterile record of a life that has ended, and it becomes a living, breathing testament to a connection that is still active. That precise blend of objective historical fact and subjective, messy human love is the alchemy that elevates the document from a simple itinerary into a true keepsake.
It makes me think about how we navigate GPS. This is going to sound like a weird leap, but stay with me.
I'm intrigued.
If you are trying to find an exact location on a map using GPS, one satellite signal only gives you a massive, vague circle of where something might be. That's just having a photo. It's vague.
Right.
Two satellite signals give you two overlapping circles, which narrows it down to a specific region. That's your photo and your factual biography. You have a good idea of the shape of the life, but you don't know exactly where they are until you get that third satellite signal.
Triangulation.
Exactly. The personal messages act as that third point of triangulation. When you combine the visual biology of the photo, the historical timeline of the story, and the emotional impact of the message's bang, you have a perfectly triangulated, hyperspecific coordinate of a human soul. You've captured the essence.
That is a remarkably precise analogy. You need all 3 points of data to locate the actual humanity of the subject. Think about it in terms of your own reading habits. Think about the last dense, 1,000-page historical biography you read about a famous figure.
Okay.
You learned a lot. Now, contrast that internal feeling with the last time you read a deeply heartfelt, entirely vulnerable letter written to you by a close friend.
Completely different feelings.
They are entirely different cognitive and emotional experiences. The biography informs your brain. The letter fundamentally moves your heart. The argument being made by the material from the funeral program site is that a truly successful funeral program, utilizing these carefully engineered templates, must successfully blend both of those formats.
It has to do both jobs.
It carries the immense burden of being both the historical record and the deeply personal love letter simultaneously.
And when those three elements, the visual recognition, the historical context, and the triangulated emotional impact, are synthesized perfectly within that clean, consistent structure we talked about, the document finally achieves its ultimate long-term purpose. Which brings us to what I found to be the most powerful, haunting claim in the entire exploration today.
Yes, we are moving into the mechanics of memory over deep time. The underlying philosophy here states something quite profound about the future of the object.
The long game.
Yes. It claims that the true ultimate value of a funeral program doesn't actually reveal itself on the day of the funeral. It lies in its ability to evoke memory far into the future. The specific phrasing is vital here. It says, years later, a simple glance at the program can bring back emotions, stories, and connections. It argues that families will continually return to these printed pages as a reliable source of comfort and reflection.
I really want to zero in on that phrase, a simple glance. Because it doesn't say, years later, after reading it cover to cover and studying it for an hour, it brings back memories. It explicitly says a simple glance.
A microsecond of attention.
That implies a mechanical process that is highly efficient, almost instantaneous. It implies that the document functions as an emotional time capsule with a hair trigger release.
It does. And the psychology behind that simple glance is deeply rooted in how our brains encode trauma and deep emotional significance. When an object is imbued with enough meaning, visual processing bypasses the slow, logical centers of the brain and fires directly into the amygdala and the hippocampus, where deep emotional memories are stored.
It's exactly like hearing the opening chord of a song you haven't heard since you were in high school. Have you had that happen?
Oh, absolutely. All the time.
You are driving, the radio is on, and you don't even need to hear the vocals or the chorus. The literal millisecond that first specific guitar tone hits your ear, you are instantly, violently transported through time and space.
It's like time travel.
You can suddenly smell the specific brand of cheap perfume your high school crush wore. You can feel the exact texture of the steering wheel of your first beat-up car. You remember the exact anxious feeling you had about graduation. That one tiny split-second audio stimulus unleashes an absolute avalanche of complex, multisensory memory and emotion.
Right.
What we are talking about here is the suggestion that this specific physical piece of paper does the exact same thing, but through a visual medium.
That is exactly how the neural pathways function in this context. The visual cue of the beautifully designed program hits the optic nerve and goes straight to the emotional center, unleashing the avalanche. But your analogy actually brings up a crucial question we have to answer.
What's that?
Why this specific document? If the goal is just to trigger an avalanche of memory and find comfort and reflection years later, why doesn't a family member just open a regular photo album or watch a home video? Why do they specifically return to the funeral program?
That is the million-dollar question. Why does this specific folded piece of paper hold more gravitational pull than a photo from a happy vacation?
I believe it has everything to do with the specific origin of the object. It's about the exact environment in which the object was forged. Because the program was created in the exact moment of a profound transition, it was conceptualized, designed, and printed in those agonizing, hyper-real days immediately surrounding the death and the service. It absorbs a unique psychological weight.
It's baked into the paper.
It was literally forged in the fires of immediate, shattering grief and simultaneously immense, overwhelming love. When you hold that program 10 years later, you aren't just looking at a nice picture of a person who is gone. You are physically holding an object that was present during the most intense emotional crucible of your family's history.
Wow.
It holds the raw, concentrated emotional energy of that specific point in time. It serves as a pure, unfiltered physical tether, not just to the person who died, but to the collective love and shared survival of the community that gathered together in that room on that specific day.
Wow. That changes everything about how you look at it. It's not just a memory of the person. It's a physical artifact from the hardest day of your life, proving that you survived it and proving that the love was real enough to hurt that much.
Exactly. It's proof of survival.
And that incredible ability to travel through time, to carry that raw, concentrated energy forward, leads us to the final and perhaps most sweeping, epic purpose outlined in this entire philosophy. The idea of the document outlasting the very individuals who attended the service.
We are moving completely past the immediate timeline of grief and entering the realm of multi-generational history. The concepts here suggest that over time, the physical program becomes a piece of history, something that can be held, shared, and passed down through generations.
It outlives us all.
The ultimate conclusion is that by focusing so heavily on thoughtful design and structure in the present moment, families are actually honoring the loved one well beyond the day of the service.
I am absolutely fascinated by the metamorphosis of this object. Think about its life cycle. It's almost biological. On day one, the actual day of the funeral, it is highly functional. It is an itinerary, yes, but it's also a source of immediate, tangible comfort for the people sitting in the pews.
It gives them something to do with their hands.
It's something to physically grip with your hands when you feel like your entire world is falling apart and your hands are shaking. It anchors you to the room. But then, fast forward 10 years, it becomes the trigger for the emotional avalanche we just talked about. Fast forward 50 years, long after the people in the pews are gone, it is no longer an itinerary. It has completely, entirely metamorphosed into a historical artifact.
The terminology I would use is that it becomes a genealogical keystone.
A genealogical keystone. Let's pump the brakes and really unpack that phrase. What does that actually look like in practice 50 or 60 years from now?
Let's visualize it. Imagine a great-grandchild born 40 years after the funeral we are talking about. They obviously never met the deceased. They have no personal memories to trigger.
Right, it's just a name on a family tree to them.
To that child, this specific printed program, which was created decades ago using these precise templates to ensure it had the necessary structure, visual beauty, and triangulated narrative, is their only tangible, physical connection to that ancestor's essence. It stops being a reminder and becomes a primary source document.
It is the foundation.
It is the architectural foundation of their understanding of their own family history. It tells them, with visual dignity, what their great-grandfather looked like. It tells them, through the life story, the historical facts of how their family came to be where they are. And crucially, through the personal messages, it tells them what their family line valued, how they loved, and how they were loved in return. It is the keystone that locks the arch of their family history together.
So, bringing this all the way back to the present moment, what does this all mean for us right now? If I am sitting at my computer tonight, looking at the materials from the funeral program site, and I am burdened with the agonizing task of trying to put one of these together for someone I love who just passed away, does this mean I shouldn't just be thinking about getting through Friday's service?
It's much bigger than Friday.
Does it mean I should literally be treating the creation of this simple folded piece of paper with the exact same weight, reverence, and terrifying responsibility as someone writing a permanent historical text?
It absolutely means that. And I think that is the most profound, resonant underlying message of this entire exploration. This is exactly why the philosophy insists so adamantly that a funeral program is more than a printed document, and why utilizing the cognitive protection of those templates matters so deeply.
Not just making a flyer.
When you are sitting at that computer, you aren't just organizing an event for Friday. You are literally actively formatting history. You are carefully grinding the lens through which entirely unborn future generations will view and understand this specific human being.
Wow, formatting history.
If you do it fleetingly, if you just throw some digital text together chaotically without structure or beauty, that history is instantly lost, degraded, or distorted. But if you do it thoughtfully, if you respect the need for physical presence, if you utilize visual beauty as a signifier of value, and if you rely on structural consistency to protect the emotional core, you are granting that person a very real, very tangible form of immortality.
Formatting history. That is an incredibly heavy responsibility, but at the same time, it is deeply, deeply empowering. It gives immense purpose to a task that usually just feels like a tragic chore.
It turns a chore into an act of profound preservation.
As we wrap up this journey today, let's just look at the unbelievable conceptual ground we just covered, based on this seemingly straightforward topic. We started by looking at a simple piece of folded paper, but by peeling back the layers, we discovered that this physical object actually acts as a vital, necessary antidote to our weightless, invisible digital hoarding.
It gives us something real to hold on to.
It physically demands our attention in a world that wants us to just keep scrolling. We explored the deep neuroscience of how the templates provided by the funeral program site act as those vital bowling bumpers, literally saving grieving, overloaded brains from cognitive paralysis.
It's giving them space to feel.
Right, and how they paradoxically use strict, rigid boundaries to allow for the absolute deepest levels of emotional expression. We broke down the specific architecture of a meaningful narrative, how you need the biology of the photo, the history of the facts, and the community triangulation of the personal messages to capture a soul.
The three essential pillars.
We saw how it functions as an instant emotional time capsule. And finally, we traced how this humble document transforms, over decades, from a simple order of service into a multi-generational time machine, a true genealogical keystone that permanently preserves a human essence long after we are gone.
It completely, irrevocably reframes our relationship with printed ephemera. It serves as a stark reminder that in an increasingly ephemeral digital world, the physical things we deliberately choose to print, design beautifully, and hold in our hands are the exact things we have chosen to make permanent.
And so I want to leave you with a final, lingering thought to ponder long after you finish listening today. We just spent this deep dive proving how a single, thoughtfully designed piece of paper from a funeral can completely outlast a lifetime of infinite digital data in terms of true, vibrating emotional resonance and historical value. Think about your own physical environment right now.
Look around your house.
What other seemingly ordinary, entirely overlooked physical objects sitting in your life right now are quietly, patiently waiting to become your family's future history? The hastily scribbled recipe cards in your mother's handwriting, the weird doodles your kid left on a napkin, the faded ticket stubs sitting at the bottom of the junk drawer. Are you treating those physical anchors with the actual care, reverence, and preservation they deserve?
Because they really are the things that last.
Because one day, they might be the only keystone someone has left. Thank you for exploring this deeply fascinating intersection of memory, tangible design, and human history with us.